Fantasy, it's a given. Your hero's gonna get an overpowered weapon at some point. Whether that be Lord of the Rings with the Sword of Narsil that was reforged by Aragorn, the dagger of Frodo's Sting, or even on the villain side, whether that be the mace that Morgoth had, the hammer of the underworld that shook the earth with each strike. There's one weapon I feel like really got looked over in that trilogy and was really the clutch weapon that kept it all together. I'm of course talking about Samwise and his pan. Now to begin, any weapon worth its salt has to have a name. Unless, of course, you're the Hound. Then you have some different ideas.
Needle. So she named your sword.
Lots of people name their swords.
Lots of.
But I feel like for Sam, we should give this thing a name before we start using it, because I'm definitely going... What? No, I don't know where your pan is. Anyways, I feel like we should give it a name. So we'll work on that through the course of this video. I'll try and think of something. But the purpose of this is I'm gonna test the durability of this thing, both offensively and defensively, and also talk a bit about metal and the different types of metals that were used to make weapons. So to start, let's talk thickness. Most medieval armors were 1 to 1.5 millimeters thick. That's like 16 gauge, sometimes 14 gauge for the helmet. This is 3.25 millimeters, so it's way, way thicker than that. However, it's made out of cast iron, and cast iron itself tends to be a lot more brittle. So before we get into the fun destruction part of the video, I want to talk a bit about iron. Iron or iron ore is going to be the base for basically every weapon or metal weapon that's used or made in history. And anyone who's played Skyrim knows the first thing you gotta do is find that iron ore. Once you get it, you can start smithing, and then 10,000 daggers later, you can start to make your dragon armor. In the real world, you have to first smelt it. And what you're gonna do is you're combine it with coke and limestone, and not that kind of coke. Coke is a different name for coals that are burned up, and then the residuals of that is coke, and that's what's used to put and infuse in it together. Once that's done, you're gonna have what's called pig iron, and that's an old term for when the ingots came out, they looked like piglets. Metallurgic coke, and it's produced by destructive distillation of coal in coke ovens. Prepared coal is coked or heated in an oxygen-free atmosphere. The material remaining is just called coke. Once you get that done, you're gonna have an ingot. And then after that, you can start to hammer it out. That's gonna be called wrought iron. So whenever something is heated and shaped by a blacksmith with a hammer, you have wrought iron. So you have wrought iron fences, things like that. It's a term that's kind of misused a lot these days. The iron is basically heated and shaped by a blacksmith. Actually, like 5 or 6 different types of iron, but I'm only gonna cover cast iron and wrought iron. So cast iron is here. Cast iron is iron that's have about 2 to 4% infusion of carbon. It also contains trace amounts of magnesium, silicon, sulfur, and phosphorus. You're gonna take the remaining iron, you're gonna mix it together with the coke and the limestone, and scrap in scrap metals and other alloys. The byproduct is cast iron is very hard. It's impossible to shape once it's formed. You can't hammer it out, but it's also brittle. So on to the testing at hand. I wanna see if this is something that can stand up durability-wise as a melee weapon. It's just kind of silly, honestly. I'm just having a good time here. So if you want to stick around for the video, I hope you enjoy it. So I'm going to start off, I'm going to hit this 16 gauge helmet with this thing. I'm going to have a helmet on just because this is brittle. I doubt I'm strong enough to break it, but better safe than sorry. I'm going to see offensive capabilities, and then I'm going to see defensively. We're going to bring the warbow out. I'm going to bring Grond out, the giant mace, and we're going to see how it holds up against something like that. So let's say you're wandering through the mines of Moria and some fool of a took knocks over something into a well and alerts all the orcs and a Balrog that you're there.
Fool of a took.
All you got with you is your trusty pan. The orcs are coming. You set up. Off the bat, the thing I can tell is when you're hitting metal to metal, this grip is not very good. I would definitely say you need some sort of glove or handle, because hitting metal on metal with this thing is really uncomfortable. I mean, I would say off the gate, that would be, I mean, obviously it's a last minute thing, but I would say that would not be ideal. And anyway, this video is so stupid, but we're gonna keep going. All right, so I'm gonna say realistically, there's not much of a chance that that's a viable option for offense. unless you're just trying to smack someone away. And then at that point, if you hit it hard enough, you're probably gonna break your hand. I'm actually gonna stop testing that right now because I could feel it on the bones of my hand, and I was like, oh, that's no good. But what I want to do now is test the durability defensively, because I feel like if anything, where this thing is going to help you out is being a shield. So I'm going to go with Grand now, and we're going to see how that stainless steel holds. Go with Grand now, and we're going to see how that cast iron holds up. Like I said, it's 3.5 millimeters thick, which is way thicker than armor of the time, so I don't know if I'm gonna do much to it, but it'll be fun to see. Honestly, that went a lot different than I expected. Moving on from iron, then we have steel. There's basically two main types of steel. You have stainless steel and carbon steel. There's more subtypes of it. I'm just going to touch on those primarily. But the reason I want to talk to this was actually about purchasing a sword or weapon. So if I figured if you watch this channel, you're interested in buying weapons and things like that, I want to give you a little bit of a user guide onto how to pick those. So stainless steel is like this one here. It's got about 10.5% chromium and usually 1.2% carbon in there. However, it is extremely good at corrosion resistance, but they're not going to be good to hold an edge, and they're going to be very brittle. So you have to be very careful. You want to make sure if you get a stainless steel sword like this, you're not using it for any sort of striking or any sort of combat. When you get into carbon steel, you have three main types. You have low carbon, medium carbon, and high carbon steel. Low carbon steel is 0.05 to 0.3% carbon, and that's considered mild steel, is basically what they do. So whenever you see something that says mild steel on it, that's just something with a really low carbon content, and it's not good for making swords. In order to make a sword, you want to have medium carbon. So basically, or 1040 is the lowest amount of carbon you want in a weapon or sword to make it usable. Medium carbon is 0.3 to 0.6%. So this one right here was at 1045 or 0.45% carbon. This is the one that cracked. You can see right there, that was from a strike. So it was brittle. It's got a better edge, but carbon does tend to crack more. That's the lowest amount you want in order to have a functionally usable sword. On the higher end of that, a lot of cold steel and their weapons are 1060 or 1065 carbon. So that's 0.6 or 0.65%, like this sword here. Much sharper, much more refined, a much better point. It holds it better as well, and it's a good overall sword that you can have. So that's like a great entry point, is that 1060, 1065. And then when you get to high carbon, that's what a lot of samurai swords or really sharp swords are gonna be made out of. That's gonna be 1095 or 1. So high carbon is 0.6 to 1% carbon with a bit of manganese in there as well. So that's gonna be the sharpest sword, but it can be very brittle if not done right. So you wanna make sure if you're getting it from a good distributor, because you don't wanna buy one that's just gonna blow up, because at that point, it can be very brittle if it's not built correctly. And then outside of carbon, you get into a little more exotic metals. There's a T10, which is a tool steel. That's got a bit of tungsten in it with a super high carbon content, like 0.9 to 1%, and a bit of silicon in there as well. Durable, very strong. And this one here, for example, this was from Albion. So this is the most expensive sword that I have. It's an AISI 6150, which is like a spring steel. So it's a really good steel as well. It holds an edge extremely well, and it's crafted by people that are really good at what they do. But when you start getting into those price ranges, you're gonna be looking at closer to $1,000. So generally, if you get a medium carbon or a higher carbon sword, make sure you trust the distributor, and then you can basically go ahead and proceed from there, picking the type that you want. So that's all about iron and steel. All right, for costume change from melee heavy, Grand wielding Morgoth to nimble, quick archer. So here's how we're gonna roll with this one. I have my already broken cast iron skillet, which was unfortunate, but now I have my 155-pound warbow here. Broken piece right here, which I'm gonna test. We got our 1600 grain arrows, and we're gonna see if the tip of these is gonna be enough to basically shatter that, and if that would cause any sort of protection for a one-shot hit, or if basically it's just you're done and done. Well, I'll tell you what, as body armor against the bodkin tip, that actually worked really well. This deflected it. You can see the bodkin tip kind of turned into a little bit of a candy cane there, and this deflected it quite well. So I feel like the mass of that mace was just too much for it to handle. And when it's something like a finer point like this, that can definitely stop an arrow. And you know, you've kind of seen armor in video games. Obviously, you played Dark Souls, you know, you have the iron helm, and then of course there's that iron set, the black iron set you sell. Super duper heavy, it can only be carried by the one character, I forget his name, good against heat. But overall, it's just not as good a viable option as steels are. So you really have to get that right one. And so if you're buying armor, you want to make sure if you're getting it, you want either they have cold rolled armor, which is basically going to take mild steel or low carbon, and they roll it out cold, and it adds a little bit of strength to it. Of course, they have other ones like spring steels and things. Those are a lot more money, but just a standard 16 gauge or 18 or 20 gauge armor, it's not going to do much aside from just look cool. So it really depends on what you want to use it for. You want a wall hanger? Great. If not, you know, you can see this here. It's about, like I said, 3.5. That's definitely going to stop something that's going to be way too heavy to wear practically. And then just because I'm out here and I think it'd be fun to see, I actually want to try and hit this stainless steel sword with an arrow and see what happens to it. Because obviously it didn't break when I hit it with the heavier weapons, but I'm curious if like a fine point of penetration will cause it to shatter or break. So just for fun, let's try it out. All right, so here we go. I'm going to set it up just like this. I'm going to try and hit right in this point right here with one of these arrows, and let's see what happens. Had a few grazes on there. You can see one of them was here, one of them was right here. So I didn't unfortunately get that good square center shot, but that arrow I lost, and I was like, that's 2 on the day, that's enough for me. Dang, I really wanted to shatter this thing. One day soon, one day I'll get it. To be honest guys, I thought that video would take just a little bit longer, and that's the way it was.